Have you ever felt the weight of expectation? The pressure to prove yourself, only to realize that true power isn't about strength or authority, but about something far deeper. Imagine a sky full of the fastest, most advanced fighter jets, poised for action, their pilots brimming with confidence. Then, in an instant, all that bravado evaporates, silenced by a single name. What kind of force could command such a stand down? Join us as we explore a story where quiet legends don't just defy the odds, they reshape the very fabric of possibility, reminding us that some names carry a weight that no weapon ever could. An unidentified bogey had just been spotted at 25,000 feet. "Let's go say hi," came the calm, cocky voice of Major Jake Falcon Stevens over the squadron frequency, "and remind her who owns this sky." Confident laughter rippled through the F-16s of the 388th Fighter Wing as they tightened formation and locked their weapon systems onto the lone intruder ahead. From their perspective, it was just another hotshot pilot pushing boundaries she shouldn't. Standard intercept, nothing they hadn't handled before, but then her name flashed across the control tower's on screen. In an instant, the laughter stopped. Radios went silent, weapon systems were quietly disarmed. An entire squadron of highly trained intercept pilots suddenly found themselves at a standstill, powerless before a name. On the ground, Colonel Marcus Webb stood frozen at the command console, his brow furrowed, eyes narrowing at the display. His voice cut through the silence, low and incredulous. "It's her." Because in this world of steel wings and supersonic speeds, there were stories, quiet, unsettling stories, about someone whose legend could silence even the fastest jets. And here she was, Captain Riley Monroe. She was 40 now, though her reputation carried the weight of a much longer shadow. Among those who whispered her name behind closed hangar doors, she was known only by her classified call sign, Viper Ghost. At one time, she had ruled the very edges of what was possible in military aviation, a figure so fearless that even the machines seemed to bow to her will. As the Air Force's most daring test pilot, she had hurled herself and countless prototypes into skies that would have chewed up lesser pilots and spat them back in pieces. 5 years ago, she had disappeared. Officially, it was called early retirement, the sanitized explanation being a classified accident during some nameless black-budgeted program. But anyone who had seen her fly knew the truth had to be more complicated. It was. Riley had become too valuable to lose, and too dangerous to officially acknowledge. Her uncanny survival in impossible scenarios, her deep knowledge of experimental designs, had made her indispensable to programs the Pentagon refused to admit even existed. Programs overseen not by generals with ribbons on their chests, but by quiet men and women in dimly lit rooms, like General Patricia Hayes at the Pentagon's Classified Operations Center. Programs whose work remained buried under layers of red tape and black ink. Today, Riley was flying alone in a modified L-39 Albatross, stripped bare of any markings that might identify her. Beneath its unassuming exterior, though, her aircraft bristled with technology few people on Earth had even heard of. Experimental avionics, sensors years ahead of standard issue. Her mission sounded simple: test the response time and efficiency of the military's most advanced air defense systems by breaching restricted airspace without warning. To radar operators watching the scopes, she was nothing more than an unidentified intruder violating control at 25,000 feet. To Riley, it was just another Tuesday. As her instruments lit up with the warning signals of incoming interceptors, she flicked her eyes down at her watch. 1 minute and 15 seconds since breaching the line. 10 seconds slower than the response time projections she'd been given. Her mouth tightened just slightly, as though disappointed by a favorite student's sloppy exam. She opened the slim logbook strapped to her thigh, scribbled the time with precise care. No wasted motion. The F-16s closing in were good, young, hungry. The best the 388th Fighter Wing had to offer, and they didn't even realize they were being watched. Not just by her, but by layers of evaluators and analysts already recording every moment of their approach. This wasn't just about their ability to lock on a bogey. This was about judgment, decisions made under pressure, choices that couldn't be drilled into you by rote. She adjusted her heading slightly, but kept her altitude steady. She wasn't here to evade them. Quite the opposite. Every move they made, every word over the radio, every micro adjustment in their attack vector was being captured by her sophisticated recording systems and streamed to a secure center where General Hayes' team was already scoring them against a classified rubric. In her cockpit, all was quiet except for the low hum of the L-39's engines and the occasional chirp of an alert she'd long since learned to ignore. Her transponder stayed dead silent, no flight plan, no identification code, just an unmarked ghost weaving her way through controlled airspace like she owned it. To the F-16s on her tail, she looked exactly like their training manual scenario, an unauthorized civilian aircraft either cut off from communication or ignoring orders outright. What they couldn't see was the web of sensors stitched into her airframe, listening to their encrypted chatter, tracking their movements down to the inch, judging every decision they made. Her eyes stayed on the instruments. To anyone watching her face, she looked almost detached, calm, clinical, like someone who'd spent a lifetime on the knife edge between life and death and had long ago learned not to flinch. On her display, she could already see them closing. Their formation was textbook, approach angles correct, protocols precise. Good, but not great. Her fingers tightened slightly on the stick as she made another small note in the logbook. The corners of her mouth twitched upward in something between approval and mild challenge. Let's see what else they've got. Seconds to comply, or you will be fired upon. Do you copy? This is not a drill. Riley hears his ultimatum through her headset, her gaze steady on the horizon. The calm in her eyes doesn't falter, not even a flicker, as the two F-16s flank her on either side, weapons hot and nerves tight. The air between them feels charged, alive with the kind of tension only pilots at 25,000 feet understand. She can almost feel their adrenaline bleeding through the radio waves. In her logbook, she writes another note with her gloved hand. Escalation protocol correct. Emotional discipline, needs reinforcement. Premature threat. Her L-39 Albatross continues to hum steadily under her hands, holding speed, holding altitude, every parameter by the book, as much as her own carefully planned mission allowed. She doesn't bother to glance at the armed jets bristling just outside her canopy. She doesn't need to. She already knows exactly where they are, what they'll do, what they think they can make her do. For a moment, she allows herself to wonder if they feel the same quiet irony she does, that the interception procedures they're clinging to were written by someone who has already flown more dangerous skies than they've ever dreamed. Someone whose fingerprints are buried in the classified margins of their very own training manuals. She adjusts her headset slightly, her fingers steady, almost bored, and murmurs just under her breath, so softly no one else could possibly hear. 3 minutes left, boys. Then the sky remembers me. On his end, Major Jake Falcon Stevens cuts the channel to mutter to his backseater, keeping his voice low but sharp. She's really pushing it. We're right there, Viper. If she doesn't turn, she's going down. Behind him in Falcon 2, Captain Lisa Viper Chen smirks under her mask and leans toward her own control panel, her tone dripping with sarcasm as she pipes up over the internal frequency. Unbelievable. A civilian trainer jet dragging her tail through restricted airspace like she owns it. She'll be lucky if she doesn't end up on the evening news. Guess some people just don't know when to quit. Riley hears every word. Her onboard monitoring suite is more advanced than they could even imagine, eavesdropping on their internal chatter as easily as she breathes. She closes her eyes for half a second, and when she opens them again, there's a quiet determination glinting there now, like steel catching light. Overconfidence, she thinks, noting it down in her book, this time without even looking at the page. Textbook error. Enthusiasm is no substitute for judgment. The F-16s shift into a tighter, more aggressive formation. From her cockpit, she watches them move, two sleek birds of prey closing to within 500 feet, ready to pounce. Through the glass, she can see their eyes, young and tense, caged behind oxygen masks, fingers taut on triggers they've never actually had to squeeze on a real target before. Their discipline is impressive. Their resolve is almost admirable. But she can also see the truth they can't yet admit to themselves. They don't know her name. Not yet. Jake's voice comes back over the radio, sharper this time, his tone edged with finality. Unidentified aircraft. This is the last time I'm going to say it. You are in direct violation of U.S. federal aviation regulations and military airspace. You have 10 seconds to respond and follow our escort vectors, or we will engage. On the internal channel, Lisa can't resist another jab, her voice low and mocking. What's she even doing up here? Thinks she's some kind of legend? Hate to break it to her, but we're about to remind her exactly who owns this sky. Riley keeps her face carefully neutral as she listens, though her pen moves quickly over the paper. Mockery during ops, unprofessional, needs correction. For the first time, she allows herself the faintest of smiles, not out of arrogance, but out of something deeper. Something that has nothing to do with rank, or weapons, or even the rules of engagement. Because in about 90 more seconds, these two pilots are going to learn something they won't ever forget. Legends don't retire. Legends just fly higher than anyone thinks to look. The sky, she knows, never forgets. And neither does she. Seconds tick by, each one sharper than the last, as the warning blares through the comms. These seconds to comply with vectors, or we will be forced to take defensive action. Do not test us. The countdown begins. Riley Monroe keeps her course steady, her hands relaxed on the stick, her eyes flicking across the instruments with the unshakable calm of someone who's danced far closer to death before. She doesn't flinch at the thought of being surrounded by friendly F-16s bristling with live ordnance. 20 seconds. The F-16s shift, tightening their net, wings glinting as they sleety into an optimal firing formation. 15 seconds. Through the canopy, she catches sight of Major Stevens, helmeted, head turning, gesturing sharply at his wingman. No doubt coordinating a warning volley. 10 seconds. Chen's voice cuts in on their internal frequency, smooth but cold, carrying that smug edge that comes from thinking you've already won. This is it. Time to show this civilian what happens when you play in the big leagues. 5 seconds, and then Riley's jet quietly transmits its encrypted identification beacon. A string of data bursts through the airwaves, and somewhere on the ground, at the Classified Facilities Control Center, alarms the likes of which few have ever heard start to chime. The signal lights up the main display in a storm of cascading classifications. Labels and codes that most of the staff don't even recognize. Information deeper than the Pentagon's own black files begins unspooling across the screen. The young radar operator who first catches it freezes, staring at the impossible authentication tags scrolling past his eyes. His voice wavers as he calls it out, barely able to process what he's reading. Sir, we have positive identification on the unknown aircraft. Authentication level. Sir, this shows presidential directive clearance. The control room goes dead quiet. Every head turns to the screen. Colonel Marcus Webb stops mid-sentence, his hand still raised in the air from whatever he was saying. Slowly, he pivots toward the display, his face draining of color as the words resolve clearly at the top of the screen in stark, restricted font lettering. Clearance. Presidential directive. Subject. Captain Riley Monroe. Call sign. Viper Ghost. Status. Active. Special operations. Webb just stares. He's heard whispers. In closed-door briefings late at night, in tones just above a whisper, about someone they called Viper Ghost. The stories were always half legend, half warning. A test pilot who could make any machine with wings dance through hell. Someone who came back from missions that left aircraft and whole squadrons in pieces. But seeing that name paired with a presidential-level clearance in black and white on his own screen makes his hands tremble as he reaches for the radio. Falcon Squadron, this is Control. Stand down immediately. Do not, repeat, do not engage the aircraft. Break off intercept and maintain respectful distance. Major Stevens' incredulous voice snaps back at once, clipped but confused. Control, confirm stand down? We have an unidentified aircraft, still refusing to comply with negative Falcon lead, Webb cuts in, sharper now. That aircraft is identified and authorized. Presidential directive. Convert to escort formation immediately. In his cockpit, Stevens freezes, exchanging a stunned glance with Chen in the back seat. A lone L-39 trainer jet had appeared on radar less than 20 minutes ago. And now he was being ordered to escort it because of a presidential directive? Chen's voice comes over the internal frequency again, but now it's a whisper, stripped of all bravado. Presidential directive? What the hell were we about to shoot down? At last, Riley keys her mic. Her voice flows through the frequency with that cool authority of someone who's spent her whole career in the thin, shadowy air between what can be admitted and what must never be said. Falcon Squadron, this is Viper Ghost. Thank you for the professional intercept. Suggest you tighten up your formation. You're part of my evaluation now. And just like that, the sky seems to still. The F-16 pilots, who'd moments ago been the apex predators in their world, feel something they can't quite name creep into their bones. Their weapons mean nothing now. Their power means nothing now. Because what stopped them wasn't superior firepower. It was a name. A name, when spoken aloud, that carried more weight than missiles. A name that froze a squadron mid-trigger pull, made hardened commanders blanch, and silenced a room full of men trained to face the worst. In the hush that follows above the roar of engines and wind, each pilot finds themselves wondering, what's more terrifying? A fighter jet locking onto you, or seeing a name on a classified screen that makes even the fighter jets back down? Where does real power come from? In Washington, the revelation of Viper Ghost's identity spreads up the chain like a shockwave, rattling every level of command and leaving a trail of stunned silence in its wake. Within minutes, secure communication lines blazed to life as word spread like wildfire. The legendary test pilot, long presumed retired, perhaps even dead, had just appeared out of nowhere, cutting through restricted airspace with clearance reserved only for the president himself. In the classified operations center buried deep in the Pentagon, General Patricia Hayes was in the middle of a high-level briefing when an aide rushed in with a secure phone and an urgent look. She broke off mid-sentence as she took the receiver. Only a handful of people in the entire Department of Defense had the clearance to even know Captain Riley Monroe's name, much less what she had been doing for the past 5 years. And Hayes was one of them. "General, we have confirmation," the aide reported, voice tight with the weight of the news. "Viper Ghost is active in Sector 7. She identified herself to a 388th Fighter Wing Squadron during what appears to be an unannounced evaluation exercise." Hayes's eyes slipped shut for the briefest moment, as if steadying herself against the inevitable. She had been expecting this call for months, ever since she herself had approved Riley's latest assignment. "Has there been any compromise of classified protocols?" she asked flatly. "Negative, ma'am, but the intercepting pilots are asking questions we can't answer." Meanwhile, at 25,000 feet above the Utah desert, the air crackled with tension as the dynamic between Riley Monroe and the Falcon Squadron shifted beneath their wings. Major Jake Falcon Stevens was still struggling to recalibrate his mind from seeing her as an unidentified threat to realizing he was now her escort. His voice finally broke through the silence, his tone careful, professional, but tinged with something more vulnerable. Respect, maybe, or disbelief. "Viper Ghost, this is Falcon Lead," he called over the radio. "Ma'am, we weren't briefed on any evaluation exercises scheduled for today." Her reply came cool and measured, the tone of a teacher correcting students who didn't yet understand the lesson. "That's exactly the point, Major. Real threats don't send scheduling memos. Tell me, how do you think your squadron performed during the intercept?" Stevens drew in a breath and thought. Military protocol demanded honesty, especially when speaking to a living legend. "Ma'am," he began, choosing his words with care, "we followed standard procedures. Our response time was within acceptable parameters, but I'm concerned about some of the commentary I heard over internal frequencies." "Good assessment," she said, jotting something into the battered logbook balanced on her knee. "What specifically concerned you?" Stevens didn't hesitate. Unprofessional remarks about civilian pilots and assumptions about the target's capabilities based purely on aircraft type. Another note scribbled into her logbook. Riley nodded to herself. That kind of leadership awareness, that willingness to call out flaws others might overlook, was what separated good pilots from truly great ones. "And what," she pressed, her voice calm but pointed, "does that tell you about your squadron's readiness for unconventional scenarios?" Before Stevens could answer, another voice cut across the channel. Captain Lisa Viper Chen, his backseat pilot, who just minutes ago had been brimming with arrogance, now sounded different, curious, respectful, humbled. "Ma'am," Chen began tentatively, "if I may ask, what exactly have you been doing these past 5 years? Your service record lists you as retired, but your clearance level suggests otherwise." Riley eased her L-39 Albatross into a lazy, graceful turn, the twin F-16s maintaining tight escort on either side, their pilots visibly more disciplined now than they had been at first contact. "What I've been doing, Captain," she said, her voice quiet but edged with steel, "is testing the boundaries of what's possible. Every aircraft you see in development, every new tactical doctrine your instructors will hammer into you, every experimental piece of technology that eventually finds its way into your squadrons. Someone has to prove it works before you're asked to risk your lives with it." Her words landed like a shockwave. In the cockpits flanking her, both pilots sat silently, absorbing the implications. While they'd been flying safe, proven by-the-book sorties in tried-and-true jets, Viper Ghost had been out in the shadows, strapping herself into prototypes and pushing them through missions that would be suicide for anyone else. Stevens keyed his mic again, his earlier formality now laced with something closer to awe. "Ma'am, are you saying you've been conducting classified test operations this entire time?" "I'm saying," she answered, her gaze fixed on the horizon, "that the aircraft you're flying, the weapons systems you trust, and the survival techniques that brought you home from your last deployment, all of them pass through my hands first. Someone has to fly the prototypes. Someone has to survive the failures. Someone has to prove that impossible missions are just missions nobody's figured out yet." Her words hung heavy in the air, settling over the formation like a shroud. For the first time, the pilots of Falcon Squadron truly understood who was flying between them, and what she'd been willing to risk so that their own machines wouldn't kill them. Then another voice crackled to life in their headsets, breaking the silence. Colonel Marcus Webb, the commander on the ground, his tone brisk but unmistakably tinged with urgency. "Viper Ghost," Webb called, "we have several agencies requesting immediate debrief on your current—" "Tell them," Riley says, her laugh crackling over the radio with a calmness that belies the high-altitude tension. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing." Her tone is light, but there's steel beneath it, a quiet defiance that makes the younger pilots fall silent on the channel. "Some missions," she adds after a beat, "don't appear on any official schedule." In the lead jet, Major Jake Falcon Stevens lets those words sink in. His brow furrows behind the visor of his helmet as he processes what she's saying, his amazement growing with each mile they cover in tight formation. "Ma'am," he finally asks, his voice steady but full of curiosity, "how many test flights have you conducted in the past 5 years?" From Riley's jet, her reply comes without hesitation, but with just a hint of a wry smile audible in her voice. "Enough," she says evenly, "to know your generation of pilots is flying safer aircraft because someone was willing to fly the dangerous ones first." From the back seat of Stevens' jet, Captain Lisa Viper Chen cuts in, her sharpness only half masking a grudging respect. "And how many experimental programs have you been involved with?" That earns the faintest laugh from Riley, soft but laced with a warning. "Captain," she replies dryly, "if I told you that, I'd have to kill you. And frankly, I prefer my pilots alive and learning from their mistakes." For several more minutes, the formation flies on, the radio filled with Riley's crisp observations and exacting feedback. She critiques their escort techniques, their discipline in formation, the precision of their radio calls, pointing out errors and offering improvements. What had started as nothing more than a routine intercept mission has, without them realizing it, become something else entirely. An impromptu masterclass taught by one of military aviation's most elusive and revered figures. Her next instruction cuts through the comms with brisk authority. "Falcon Squadron, execute tactical separation and reform on my 6. Let's see how well you adapt to non-standard commands." Stevens doesn't hesitate, neither do the others. The F-16s peel away in a fluid maneuver, their pilots now fully aware that the voice on the other end of the channel belongs to someone whose judgment carries weight far beyond mere rank or protocol. When they reform neatly behind her, she doesn't offer praise, only silence, which somehow feels like approval. Then her voice takes on a more serious edge, the kind that silences even the air itself. Major Stevens, Captain Chen, I want you both to remember something. Both of them instinctively lean toward the sound of her words, as if she's speaking directly into their cockpits. Every time you climb into a cockpit, you're trusting technology and techniques that someone else proved wouldn't kill you. That someone is usually flying alone, in an experimental aircraft, with no backup and no guarantee of survival. Stephen swallows hard before replying, his voice lower now, carrying a new weight of respect. Ma'am, we understand, and thank you. But she's already cutting him off, her tone turning sharp again. Don't thank me yet. Your real evaluation starts now. I'm transmitting coordinates for a tactical scenario your squadron has never encountered. Standard procedures won't work. Conventional wisdom will get you killed. Show me you can adapt. New coordinates flash onto their navigation displays, and each pilot steals a glance at the restricted training area highlighted on their screens. Even among veterans, that sector is infamous. Ruthless terrain designed to test every ounce of skill, known to humble even the most seasoned aviators. But this is more than just a brutal training exercise. They're flying under the direct tutelage of a pilot whose very name has become legend, a figure who's lived in the shadows, quietly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Without further delay, Riley banks toward the new heading. The 4 F-16s follow her lead, holding perfect formation, their movements sharper now, their minds racing to keep up. Her final words before radio silence settles over them hang in the air like a challenge. Falcon Squadron, welcome to the advanced course. Today you'll learn why some names don't need clearance. They clear the entire swing. As the formation disappears into the horizon, ground control picks up a new transmission, one that will remain classified for decades to come. Valuation in progress, Viper Ghost active. All agencies stand by for results. The pilots who thought they'd been hunting an intruder now realize they've become students, learning lessons from a master they never knew was still out here, flying on the very edge of what's possible. An instructor who officially retired 5 years ago, but never stopped flying the edge of tomorrow. By the time the formation returns to base, the tactical scenario Riley put them through has already begun to ripple through the military aviation world. Word spreads quickly that Viper Ghost, the name whispered in awe, has stepped out of the shadows once again. The maneuvers they've flown today have redefined what they thought they knew about their jet's limits. What started as an ordinary intercept has become training that will shape how the 388th Fighter Wing prepares for unconventional threats for years to come. On landing, Riley's jet taxis to a stop, and she's escorted straight to the base commander's office. Colonel Marcus Webb is already waiting, his nervous energy palpable. Behind him, a secure video conference feed flickers on the wall, showing General Patricia Hayes and several high-ranking officials whose faces are half-shrouded in darkness for security. Captain Monroe, Webb begins, his words measured, his gaze flicking to the generals on the screen before settling on her. I've been ordered to provide you with any support you need, but I have to ask. Riley remuffles her helmet, and a few strands of gray hair slip loose, a quiet testament to the 5 years she's been officially retired. She meets his eyes, calm and unflinching, as he finishes his question. Just how long have you been conducting evaluations of our air defense systems? She smiles faintly and says nothing. General Hayes' voice carried from the secure screen, calm but cutting through the silence of the room like a blade. I know enough to see your pilots are well-trained, but under-challenged, she said evenly, her words landing with quiet authority. They execute procedures flawlessly, yet falter when those procedures no longer apply. At the table, Colonel Marcus Webb scribbled furiously in his notebook, the only sound beyond Hayes' voice. She continued, gaze fixed on the camera. Riley, your assessment of the 388th? Captain Riley Monroe, known in call signs as Viper Ghost, sat back slightly, arms folded, her expression unreadable, but her sharp mind already forming her reply. They have a solid foundation, she began after a long beat, her tone measured, professional. But they need exposure to unconventional scenarios if they're to grow beyond the checklist. Major Stevens shows natural leadership instincts. Captain Chen's technical skill is exceptional, but she'll need to rein in her commentary during operations. There's a difference between being sharp and being disruptive. Webb nodded at every point, pen moving faster now, while Hayes's faint smile betrayed a flicker of approval. Would you be willing, and Hayes asked, to conduct additional training sessions? Riley hesitated just a moment, her mind catching on the unexpected tug she felt in her chest at the question. For 5 years, she'd worked alone, testing aircraft in scenarios no one else dared, training herself in complete isolation, far from the predictable rhythms of squadrons and manuals. The idea of passing some of that on, shaping pilots for a world that rarely made sense, surprised her with how much it appealed. I can arrange periodic evaluations, she finally said, her lips quirking into the faintest of smiles. But understand, my training methods aren't in any manual. I teach pilots to survive situations that officially don't exist. Later that day, Major Jake Falcon Stevens and Captain Lisa Viper Chen were debriefed separately, their accounts of the day's events spreading quietly but powerfully through the tight-knit aviation community. Word of what they'd seen, and what they'd failed to see coming, created ripples, and Chen, chastened and noticeably humbled, sought Riley out just before departure. "Ma'am," Chen began, her voice lower than usual, her shoulders squared in a posture that was equal parts respect and contrition. "I owe you an apology. My comments during the intercept, they were unprofessional. But Riley cut her off with nothing more than a faint, knowing smile. "Captain," she said gently, "you called it like you saw it. That's your job. But next time, remember, assumptions can get you killed. The aircraft doesn't make the pilot makes the aircraft." Chen nodded solemnly, clearly turning the words over in her mind, and stepped back as Stevens came forward. "Ma'am," Stevens said, his voice carrying a quiet admiration now, "what you showed us today, those maneuvers, they're not in any training manual because they're not supposed to be. You made it clear. Some techniques only work when conventional wisdom fails." "That's the point," Riley replied simply, meeting his gaze. "I teach pilots to think beyond their limitations, because that's where survival lives." As evening shadows stretched long across the tarmac, Riley prepared to depart in her L-39. The sleek, enigmatic jet that had earlier sparked so many whispered questions now revealed itself as something more than a mystery, an experimental test platform bristling with systems and capabilities most pilots would never even know existed. Colonel Webb walked with her to the flight line, hands clasped behind his back. "Captain," he said, his voice hopeful despite his best efforts to keep it even, "will we see you again?" She adjusted her helmet under one arm, her eyes already scanning the horizon as the last of the sun bled into orange and violet. "When you least expect it," she said, glancing back at him with a small smile. "That's when the real learning happens." Base personnel had quietly gathered near the line, drawn by the wordless sense that something worth witnessing was about to happen. Many of them had heard the stories of Viper Ghost's legendary test flights, her uncanny instincts, her impossible recoveries. But watching her in person transformed legend into reality. Her calm competence, her presence left an impression more indelible than anything they had heard. As the L-39 taxied out, Chen drifted closer to Stevens, her eyes never leaving the jet. "Think we'll ever be that good?" she asked, her voice soft, almost reverent. Stevens didn't answer right away. He watched as the L-39's nose lifted, the aircraft surging skyward into the fading light, and then he said quietly, "Maybe, if we're willing to fly where she's been flying, in the spaces between what's known and what's possible." Riley's jet vanished into the sunset, but her impact on the 388th fighter wing lingered, written in the expressions of those who watched her go. In the months that followed, training protocols were rewritten, evaluation standards raised. A new generation of pilots learned to push boundaries, not because it was expected, but because someone had shown them that boundaries could and should be moved. In her final radio transmission before switching to encrypted frequencies, Riley left them with words that would echo in pilot training classrooms for decades to come. "The sky doesn't care about your rank or your years. It only respects competence and humility." In the vast cold expanse of military aviation, where speed and firepower usually drew the most attention, it became clear that real respect was reserved for those who earned it in the places beyond maps, beyond protocols, where nothing but skill and judgment kept you alive. Riley Monroe had always understood what most pilots never did. True authority isn't handed down in a rank briefing or written into any regulation. It's forged in the crucible of impossible missions, where survival depends not on luck or the latest hardware, but on the quiet courage to fly beyond the edges of what everyone else calls safe. 3 months after her encounter with Falcon Squadron, the 3/8th Fighter Wing flew with a new understanding of what excellence looked like. Training exercises now included scenarios designed to break expectations, forcing pilots to adapt rather than just comply. Major Jake Stevens, recently promoted to squadron commander, kept a recording of that final transmission in his office, and on particularly hard days, he'd play it back and remember. The sky only respects those who earn it. On his desk sat a worn folder, its edges frayed, holding the radio transcripts from that day, not displayed like a trophy but kept close as a quiet warning. For Major Jake Falcon Stevens, it was a reminder etched in black and white that assumptions can kill faster than any missile, and that the hardest, most valuable lessons often come from the last place you'd think to look. I learned something that day, Stevens tells every fresh class of pilots during their orientation. His voice carries the weight of hard-earned respect, a tone that silences even the cockiest recruits. Up there, the sky doesn't give a damn about your rank, or your confidence, or your ribbons. It only answers to competence, and to the humility to know when you're outmatched. Captain Lisa Viper Chen, who once had the swagger of someone who thought they already knew it all, is now the squadron's sharpest instructor for unconventional scenarios. The arrogance that once defined her has been replaced with a steady, calculated precision. Her students notice the quiet intensity in her eyes as she guides them through situations that don't appear in any manual. And when they ask her what changed, she always gives the same answer. It all came down to 5 minutes. A 5-minute conversation with someone who showed her, without bravado, that legends aren't myths. Legends are just people who endured things others couldn't. Within the Air Force, a quiet shift has taken place. They call them the Ghost Protocols now, specialized training programs designed to prepare pilots for encounters that defy standard identification. Encounters with aircraft that don't exist, at least officially, and missions that don't follow any conventional playbook. Because not everything in the sky follows a flight plan, and not every threat flashes on your radar. But the biggest change isn't in the policy, it's in the mindset. There's a new generation of aviators now who approach each sortie with an understanding far deeper than doctrine. Excellence isn't about following every rule to the letter. It's about knowing which rules can, and sometimes must, be broken, and doing so with skill and awareness. And somewhere, always just out of sight, Captain Riley Monroe, Viper Ghost, continues her work in the shadows, testing experimental aircraft the public won't know about for decades. Flying missions the rest of the world doesn't even realize are happening, proving again and again that what everyone else calls impossible is just a mission waiting for someone brave and capable enough to figure it out. She shows up when nobody expects her. She assesses, she executes, and then she's gone again, vanishing back into that classified realm where legends are forged. On rare occasions, she'll appear at a training academy. Standing in front of rows of young cadets with bright eyes and sharper ambitions, she speaks plainly, with a calm authority that silences the room. Her message resonates far beyond the world of aviation. Authority isn't about having the power to command. It's about having the competence to lead when it matters most. When she touches the wings on her flight suit, it's not ceremony that gives them meaning. She earned them not through official recognition, but through missions that, officially, never happened. Some pilots wait for clearance before they make a move. Others, like Riley, know that in the space between what's official and what's necessary, clearance comes not from permission, but from pure capability. And the young men and women in her audience lean forward, hanging on her every word, already dreaming of how they too will someday push boundaries no one has even imagined yet. At Nellis Air Force Base, in the test pilot training facility, a new plaque hangs on the wall. Its inscription is simple, but everyone who reads it feels the weight of its truth. Some names don't need clearance. They clear the sky itself. They remind us that legends aren't built on success alone, but on the willingness to take flight where failure carries more consequence than missing a target. True authority doesn't scream or flash. It moves quietly, flies alone, and can make entire squadrons stand down with nothing more than a name, and the respect that name has earned. The sky does not remember those who tried to conquer it. The sky remembers those who mastered it,